Welcome, everybody. My name's Randy Helm. I'm a member of the class of 1970, Yale College, Berkeley. And I'm a member of the YAA Board of Governors, which is why I'm doing this thing tonight. We have a series of programs every Thursday night, except during the holidays. I'm going to let the co-chair of our committee, Jeff Feldman, tell you a little bit about that. But then he'll get back to me and we'll talk about tonight's show. So Jeff, take it away.
Great, thank you, Randy, and welcome everybody. As usual, Thursday night, we call our must-see YALE. We've got all sorts of different good sessions and stories and shows we like to call in. We get a lot of regulars, so welcome back, regulars. We get new faces, which we love. If you can keep your face live, that's great. If you're doing other things, we understand. We try to make it interactive, so it's not so flat. You have questions, go in the chat, raise your hand. We like to ask the questions yourself, kind of mix it up a little bit. It adds a little bit of pulse to the show. These are the upcoming show we have. So we do have a holiday break, and happy holidays to everybody for next week and week after. And then we'll kick in again. You'll see us on January 6th for Yale Women in Government. That'll be a spectacular show, and then it'll just continue through the spring. In addition, if you're not already signed up, sign up for Cross Campus. Thousands and thousands of Yaleys have signed up. It's a great place to connect and build a community, ask questions. As I like to say, you get help, you give help. It's just really been a tremendous thing. And that link will go in the chat room as well in a few moments. So I tell you to take that down. Thanks for joining. And we're going to go back to Randy, and we'll have a great show. Have a great night.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. So let me introduce Rodger Kamenetz. He is a classmate of mine. He was across the street in Branford, Yale College 70. Unlike me, he's led a very productive life. He is the author of 14 books of poetry and prose. And his most recent books of poetry were published in 2018. That was Yonder, and 2020, Dream Logic. He's also the author of a nonfiction book, including an international bestseller, The Jew in the Lotus, which was published in 1994 by Harper and became a PBS documentary. He also wrote The History of Last Night's Dream, which was published by Harper in 2007. And was featured by Oprah Winfrey on her Soul series. He's a professor emeritus of English and religious studies at LSU, lives in New Orleans, which I envy. And he's the founding teacher of a group called Natural Dream Work, which works with clients seeking spiritual direction through their dreams. So I put his bio and his website on the chat so that you can access that if you want. And there's so much that we could be talking about with Rodger, but I think that tonight we're just going to be talking about dreams. And I want to start just by asking Rodger, what's your purpose in working with dreams? How did you get there, and why? And what are you doing with them?
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for the introduction. And hello, everybody. It's nice to be with my fellow Yaleys across time and space here. I've always been interested in dreams. I remember dreaming when I was in Branford and writing them down. And I thought some way that would help. I thought there was a mysterious relationship between dreams and poetry, although I couldn't have articulated it back then when I was fascinated by both, and I've continued to be interested in both. The one impetus was, when I was at the meeting between the rabbis and the Dalai Lama that I wrote about in The Jew in the Lotus. I was very impressed by the Tibetans' use of visualization and imagery as a spiritual practice. And I guess that particularly struck me because my sense of Judaism was, aniconic. But I began to ask, well, what is there like that? And began investigating, and I wrote a book, The History of Last Night's Dream. Well, first of all, I tried to figure out what happened to the dream in the Bible, the Torah, because after the book of Genesis, there are no more dreams. The dream disappears. And that's kind of interesting. And yet we have these two avatars of the dream, Joseph and Jacob. Anyway, skipping ahead, I met this intuitive dream master in Vermont. He taught me as kind of a wildflower teacher, not a psychologist at all, but actually a postman. And studying with him was really great for me because he taught me the way of images rather than words, and I'm a big word person. I learned a way to work with dreams that can help people immerse themselves in feelings and an imagination. And I would say that our experience of dreams is healing because it restores to us a sense of feeling as opposed to living a life of reactivity. And also, as Borges says, the most amazing thing is not all the different ways we could interpret dreams, but the fact of the dream. The fact of the dream is what's extraordinary. That human beings, all of us, dream 4 or 5 times a night, depending on your medications, but generally 4 or 5 times a night. And to my mind, this is an extraordinary thing that the mind, or if you prefer, the brain, is spontaneously producing images constantly in an ever evolving sense. And so this productivity of the imagination, one way to experience that is through creative work, obviously, not just poetry, but any kind of creative work you're doing. But the other way we experience it is nightly in our dreams. I guess having worked with this master for a number of years, I began to branch out on my own. For the past 15 years, I've been working one-on-one with people. So I've had the chance to literally read thousands and thousands of dreams and talk them over and re-experience them with people. And that's, it's great work, and it's a beautiful work to be doing.
You have said in our previous conversations that it's not so much about interpreting them, the dreams, that is, it is bringing them to life. What's the difference? Right. How do you mean that?
I think most people, after all, we're conditioned by our culture to think of dreams as something to be interpreted. In fact, that does go, some of the oldest books we have, going back to ancient Sumer, are really dream interpretation books. Obviously, in the Bible, the story of Joseph, the interpreter, kind of overshadows the dream of his father, Jacob, which doesn't have an interpreter, right? Jacob has the dream of the ladder. He wakes up and his world is transformed. I think that's a more primordial dream, but the notion of interpretation is so associated with dreams, and obviously reinforced by Freud and Jung, that seems to be the go-to response, that we're supposed to interpret a dream. I would liken it to this. Let's say you're in a beautiful redwood forest in California, and you're just soaking in the quiet, and the duff is on the ground, and you're looking up into the canopy of redwood trees, and someone comes up to you and says, "What does the tree mean?" Right? How do you interpret that tree? And you'd say, "What? I'm having an experience of the tree. I'm not I'm taking it in. I'm feeling it." And that more existential, phenomenological approach to dreaming is really fruitful. And so what we try to do with people is, instead of try to wean them away from the habit of interpretation and ask them in the sessions to re-experience the dream. And we can slow the dream down, we can stop the dream, give it more time, to give people the possibility of feeling the images, feeling the imagos. In other words, in dreams we have persons, which technically are called imagos, or we have things, which are technically called images. And there's a way to try to give some examples of that. But the The see, yeah.
I guess what I'm hearing, see if I'm hearing this right, is that it's, and you and I were talking earlier about how dreams, we tend to think of them as stories,
Right.
but that's not what's so important as the feelings that the dream generates, whether that's fear or pleasure or grief or whatever. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that's the right place to focus and how that can be helpful?
Well, we try to make a distinction. When we were in Dharamsala, the Dalai Lama had one question for the Jewish delegation, which has stayed with me since that was 31 years ago, but I've never forgotten the question, which was, how does your tradition deal with afflictive states of mind? Afflictive states of mind. And so the Tibetans, in their way of thinking, speak of called kleshas, but basically these are difficult emotions. Among them are, I know, sure nobody here has experiences, but they include anxiety, envy, jealousy, rage, the stuff that keeps you awake at night, worry. These are all afflictive states of mind. And so in our work, we call them reactivity. So if you're a reactive person, you're constantly bouncing off of your experience into some sort of reaction. And usually that reaction has a story wrapped around it, like he's trying to take my job, or she doesn't like me, or, oh, I did a terrible thing. I should be ashamed of myself. So shame and guilt are also reactive states of mind. And they tend to wrap themselves around a story. They tend to either be about the past or about the future, right? By contrast, feelings, and by feelings, shorthand here, of course, would include terror or fear or awe or wonder. They're really all on the same line of feeling. Joy and love and pleasure, all in the same line of feeling. Disgust is a core feeling. Pain, sadness, core feeling. So when they have these feelings, whether they're, quote, pleasant or unpleasant feelings, they make us whole. We feel them entirely. Whereas with afflictive states of mind or reactions, we feel them partially. And they have a somewhat more mechanical quality to them.
Let me
yeah.
just seek some clarification there. So are you saying that these feelings that we may have in our waking moments,
Yes,
we experience more profoundly in our dreams than we do when we're awake?
sometimes.
The grief,
It
the rage, the whatever, whatever we're working on in our dream.
Sometimes. I mean, after all, we do put a lot of energy in our lives. We lock our doors, we have alarms, we're careful when we walk to our car in the dark. We do all that to avoid the feeling of terror, right? We don't want to feel terrified, and we do a pretty good job of that. So yeah, sometimes for some people, the only place they actually experience actual terror generally would be in their dreams. That's why dreams of terror get that special name, nightmare. They're simply dreams with terror in them, but we call them nightmares. Yeah, I mean, in some cases, yes, people will experience much deeper feelings in their dreams than they experience in waking life, which is sort of unfortunate, maybe even a little sad.
By
Yeah.
the way, I just wanted to tell people that we will have Q&A, and if you have questions that you just are afraid you might forget the question, put them in the chat, and I'll try to make sure that we get around to them. Okay.
Right.
So, I noticed that I'm keeping an eye on the chat out of one corner of my waking eye, and not seeing anything there yet that what I put there. So
Okay.
Anyway.
So yeah.
So tell us about the healing power of dreams.
Okay, thanks for
It's
asking
that's
that.
something that you mentioned
Right,
earlier, not tonight, but in another conversation.
right.
Uh, that surprised me, frankly. I
Hmm.
think dreams is, like most people do. I think of them as, okay, so what is that all about? Why did I
Hmm.
dream that?
Right.
What you know
Hmm.
what's that trying to tell me? But healing was not necessarily
Right.
part of my approach. So
Right.
tell us how you.
Well, probably the best way might be to give you an example or two, if that's okay. So let me share a screen, and I mean, I'll tell you a little story about this. I hope I'm sharing the right screen and not my something else. Let's see how that works. Does that look good?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have up here the heading, The Sacred Encounter. And this first dream actually was not from a client. I was giving a presentation when the book, History of Last Night's Dream came out, and a woman came up to me and told me this story, which I'm going to tell you, that her daughter had was in medical school. She was doing a residency, and in a parking lot late at night, leaving her work, she was murdered. It was very sad. So this grief was so terrible for her, and um, she'd really been mourning her for a very long time. And one night, she said she had a dream, and she dreamed that she was at a funeral, and she saw her daughter inside a coffin. And of course, it was a terribly painful experience. Here she was experiencing pain in such a direct, immediate way. And that, I think we know that in our dreams, that can happen in our dreams. And there's nothing else to do but feel that moment. But then the dream shifted, and now her daughter was standing before her, facing her, and she said, Mom, when I first had to go in the coffin, I felt very scared. But then I realized I don't have to stay here. So that dream was healing. That encounter with her daughter, first of all, the power of this, to see her daughter again, speaking in her voice, facing her. Let's not discount that immediacy, that experience of her voice, her way of talking, her presence was profoundly healing, especially after the first feeling in the dream of such loss, such pain. But of course, along with it was what she was saying to her, which is, when you think of me now, you don't have to keep thinking of me as a dead person in a coffin. You can revive in your imagination and feel me as a living presence. So, you know, this kind of dream, I think, is one reason I got so interested in dreaming, because I think most of us, casually in the world don't take dreams very seriously. But I will say that this sort of dream, uh, most people do take seriously. They hold on to it. And she told me that having had this dream really changed things for her, and she got her through her intense grief and into a different way of feeling and thinking about the loss of her daughter. So I just wanted to offer that as just an example, because sometimes an example makes it a lot clearer than talking in general.
Well, this is so irresistible now. I've jumped ahead to the dad in the white fireplace. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this was a guy named Bill, and it was a very simple dream. Um, he was leaving the house of his childhood, and he could tell that because there was a fireplace that at a certain point his mother had painted over the brick and made it white, and that was a very specific era in his life when he'd gone off to college. And um, he went to the door to leave. It's a very simple dream, right? He went to the door to leave, but then something made him feel, no, I have to turn back. And he turned back, and he came back to hug his father. And this was a person who was not close to his father, who always felt a distance from his father. And when he had this dream, his father was no longer alive. And of course, many, many, many years after the occasion of the dream, which to him felt like the time when he went off to college. And he just said, "I love you, Dad." And his father held him for a very long time. And he began to feel the loss, the grief, the pain, and it came out in this very direct way. So again, dreams bring us to feelings. And notice that in both examples here, the feelings are not so-called up feelings, happy feelings. That's not the point. All of our feelings are interrelated. They are part of, you might call the harmonics of feeling. And just like you wouldn't want to play a piano that only had white keys, you really can't live without pain, and you can't live without terror, and you can't live without, even disgust. I mean, in other words, you need all of those feelings in order uh, to have a full emotional life.
Mm. And this is healing. This was healing for Bill as well, to because maybe he hadn't expressed his affection to his dad as much as he had wanted to.
Yeah, I think yes, I think he had done some, but I think he felt it was like a chance to continue the conversation. I think, really that the dreams that we have of our dead, they're not always good dreams in this sense. Like these two are good examples. I mean, for instance, I had a client, I went through with her, and her husband got sick, and then eventually he died, and the dreams really were carrying her through that with such great support. And then about 3 or 4 months after he died, he came back in a dream, and they sat down, and they had a cup of coffee, and then he said, "Well, I have to go to work," and he left. And there was no feeling. And so, and I said, "Well, was that what it was like? I mean, does that really express kind of the way it was?" And she said, "Yeah." So actually it was a very sad dream, in part because of the lack of feeling that
So
she experienced.
she was re-experiencing some of the dissatisfaction in their relationship,
Exactly. That's right.
things that weren't fulfilling.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not always easy when you're doing what I do, to be with the person, to help them. My goal is just to support you to feel what you're feeling in your dreams, and to also point out whenever you're making up a story that is getting in the way of feeling. I try, I mean, the time we have, but I'm trying to make a point that reactivity usually has a story involved: blaming somebody, being ashamed of yourself, anger at somebody, right? Whatever the reaction is, or just instead of feeling your terror, you feel anxiety about the future. Instead of feeling terror in the moment, you feel anxiety projected into a future story. I often say, it's kind of a joke, but it's true, that in a way, terror is the cure for anxiety. If we were able to feel more of our terror, then maybe we wouldn't have to suffer so much anxiety.
I'm there may be more that you want to share with us that's on your screen.
Oh, that's okay. Let's go to your question. I'll turn this off, and we can come back.
I'm curious as to how you your role in drawing out people who they come to you, they know that this is what you do, and
Right.
they come because they think that it will help them in some way.
Right.
And so you're a very astute listener. Um, how did they do all the work, or are there ways in which you can just sort of present them with a key, or point out where the keyhole is, or how do you how do you how do you help them um, find the meaning and the healing in these dreams?
That's such a good question. So first of all, I want to say up front, obviously, I'm a poet, I'm a writer. I have zero credentials as a psychologist, psychotherapist, anything like that. I make that very clear to the people I work with. But they stick around anyway. And, you know, it's in the context of a relationship. And we meet, you know, once every 2 weeks or so. They bring the dreams. We talk a little bit about the previous work we did. We usually give them a homework, which is a moment of intense feeling through an encounter in the dream, which they are asked to dwell on during the week. That stimulates new dreams. But in the session itself, we follow the dreams, and we're really looking for, this is the thing, I'll say it this way, a dream is a poem disguised as a story, by which I mean there are moments of encounter in which time stops in the dream and deepens, okay? And those moments of encounter of great feeling, we've seen a couple examples, you know, just the hug of the father or the encounter of the mother with her daughter. These are moments that we want to dwell on because they're moments of, I call them sacred encounter, where there's always a depth of feeling. And just being able to experience those feelings can change us. So I try to facilitate that. I try to strip away the story making, because there's always, people are going to tell you stories, you know. I had a client who was dreaming, and she said that her stove was making blue flashes while she was cooking. And I said, "Oh, you were cooking. What were you cooking?" And there was a silence. Then she said, "Actually, I wasn't cooking anything." But she thought she was cooking because that's her story. I cook meals for my family, you see. So the story was more real to her than the event or the fact of the dream. So we try to guide people away from the story. We look for the holes in the story, and we go to the events, and that's where we have the encounter.
You said the events.
Yes.
Aren't the events part of the story? Right? Isn't that what the story is constructed of?
No.
You know,
Yeah.
obviously, I need to be instructed here.
I don't think I want to instruct you, Randy, but just to say that what I mean by the event in the dream, as opposed to the story making of the dream point of view. An event is something that is seen or felt, tasted, is immediate, right? A story is a supposition, maybe a background. I'll give you a quick example. Someone had a dream, and she said, "I killed somebody, and the body was in the back of the trunk. And then I saw a blue light flashing in the mirror, and it was the police. And the police came and stopped me and got me out of my car. And I knew that they had caught me. And I was really scared, but I also was nervous that they were going to open the trunk." Okay, that was the dream, more or less. So I said, "Well, you say you killed somebody and they're in the trunk. Do you remember how you killed the person?" No. "So did you use an axe or a gun, or how did you kill the, I don't remember." I said, "I see. How did you lift the body and put it in the trunk?" "I don't remember." "So did you actually see yourself kill somebody and put that person in the trunk?" No, actually not." "So what's the first event in the dream?" "Oh, the blue light flashing." Maybe that explains what I'm saying, that dreams can help us distinguish between, roughly speaking, imagination, which emerges spontaneously, and fantasy, which always has an ego involvement, which has some kind of, there's something in it for us when we have a fantasy. Now you might say, "Well, what's in it for her?" Well, she has a lot of guilt, so she likes to imagine, fantasize that she killed somebody.
The dream is
Right.
the
Right.
event was I'm getting caught.
Right. And so,
I killed somebody, but
right.
it's not about who
Yeah.
I killed and why and all that. But
Right. But actually, if someone opened the trunk, they might have found nothing in there. Right. That might have been the point. I mean, she didn't get that far in that particular case, but But I imagine usually police in dreams are trying to help you. So probably that's what they would have gotten to, but it didn't happen that way. Does that make sense, Randy? I didn't mean to
Yes.
instruct you, but
Yes, it does, because the intense feeling that your mind or your brain or whatever it is trying to work through is it will summon up some sort of an experience that would evoke that feeling, I guess. Is that right? So
well, I think in her case, she wasn't able to have feelings because she was caught up in this story. She didn't really have what I would call feelings. She had reactions. In this case, she was caught up in a guilt reaction that she built a story around to make sense of her guilt reaction.
well,
So she had an affliction of guilt. Don't you think guilt is an affliction?
I've been pulled over by the police before, and there is
Oh.
a very intense emotional reaction when that happens. What is
Right.
going to become of me now?
Right.
And
Sure.
hey, and I'm
Right.
white, so I can't imagine that it wouldn't be much more intense if I were a person of color.
Well, we can't always, we want to just stay. What I want to do always is stay with the fact of the dream, and everything you're saying is certainly true. But what I'm asking is, well, what was your experience in the dream? What was the phenomenology of the dream? What happened in space, time, and feeling in the dream as it appeared to you? And that's different. That's through the senses. Okay. That's different from some story in your head that the dream point of view has about what's going on that may or may not be true. Usually isn't.
We're getting some questions now in the chat, and
Cool.
I'm going to ask Annika Lee. Why don't you say it? Why don't you read your question or speak it to Rodger, and see.
Sure. Hi. Sorry, I'm calling in from work, but for once I'm working from home, so I can come on camera. Um, I'm in Tokyo. I was curious, what is your approach for people who feel dreams might help or occasionally have ones that are very intense but don't consistently remember them, and so maybe find it hard to work with a pattern or to, come back to you a week later and say, oh, this is how it developed.
Right. So Annika, thanks for the question, and hello, Tokyo. I wish I could be there right now. The one piece I think I already mentioned, that usually in the session we come to a moment of encounter that's intense. I never give a person a reaction to dwell on, but I always give them, if we have one, a feeling to dwell on, if we can get to a feeling. And amazingly, just by spending, I don't ask you to, it's not a meditation, but you just sort of drop into it for a moment, drop out of it. You just by staying in touch with it throughout the week, or usually 2 weeks or whatever distance is, it stimulates new dreams. If anyone who's listening would like to remember a dream, one way to do that is to remember a dream you do remember, write it down. It can be from any time in your life, and just dwell on it a few times a day and before you go to bed. And I found that always stimulates dreams. Now, I'm going to plug my book and say that a lot of people who read the history of last night's dream also have told me that they dream a lot after reading it. I don't know if that's true, but that's nice of them to say. So, thinking about dreams, thinking about powerful moments from one of your dreams is a good way to remember, and it works pretty well. It's true that we have a bit of a dream drought. In some cases, if you're not paying attention to your dreams to begin with, you're not going to remember them. But if you get a notebook, or however you like, I use my iPhone now, and just write down whatever you remember. It doesn't have to be a full CinemaScope story. It could be like crickets, the word crickets. It could be a sound. It could be a single image. But if you keep accumulating this, I guarantee that pretty quickly your dream life will come back to you. So it's like anything else. You have to give it a little, you have to prime the pump a little bit, and it'll come back. And I said in my book, it's like being alive twice. I mean, to have a dream life and a waking life, that's great. You have two lives. So why not? I hope that answered
Great.
your question. Was
Yes,
that
thank you
helpful?
so much.
Sure.
You
Thanks
had
for
a
your question.
too, that you wanted to put out there. Jeff Feldman.
Yeah, thank you, Randy and Rodgers. Fascinating stuff. Actually, I had two questions based on what you've done. My first question actually ties into the discussion we just had. And the second question, if I'm allowed to ask a second question, you'll tell me at the end of the first answer. But on the first one, on the framework, as I get a little bit older and hitting sleeping issues and all that sort of thing, we chatted before we started, so a little bit of a student of reading, sleep issues, and so forth. And one of the things I've read, the different stages of sleep, and I thought I had read that, in particular in REM, you don't remember your dreams from your REM state. It's the other lighter sleep states that you tend to remember dreams in. So A, I just wanted to know to corroborate that, if that was your understanding, and B, if so, we're kind of missing a bunch of dream inventory, right? If we can't remember those particular dreams. And the last aspect on this first question, this is still the first question, by the way. Typically, again, personal experience, I think other people experience it. There's a moment of culmination of something in a dream. You wake up from the dream, right? So you maybe remember that last moment of the dream because that's what made you wake up. So if you could talk about that, and then I just wanted to share one other personal thing from your other stories, but I'll be a good listener.
Well, the part about sleep studies, I when I wrote The History of Last Night's Dream, it came out in 2007, so that's quite a while ago, and I've had a lot more experience. I did look into some of that, and at that time, my understanding was that REM sleep was the stage where we were having dreams. But I understand that's gotten a little more complicated now, and I'm not au courant with where they are with it. The sense of, and this goes back to the notion that what's important for me in a dream are feelings and encounters with people, or encounters with the dead, encounters with loved ones, encounters with monsters, encounters with archetypes, encounters with lions. These are really important in dreams and carry a lot of feeling. If we think of a dream as a story, then we're worried, oh, I forgot what happened here or whatever. When I look really closely at the phenomenology of dreams, I notice that they really aren't stories. They really are a series of kind of dots, little moments, boop, 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 like pearls without a string, that later we string together in our minds as a story. And that's why people are always saying dreams are weird stories. Well, they're not supposed to be stories. They're actually supposed to try to bring us to moments of deep feeling. So
in that regard, if you don't mind me interjecting, so the common dream, taking the exam, but I'm not wearing pants, then I'm running. Like, you discount all those, forget all those, or is it just
no, I don't discount any
bad pizza?
I don't discount any dreams. No. I mentioned that. Let me give you an example. Let me put one up, and I think that'll help. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's kind of a simple dream. So I'm going to share it, and if that's okay, because it's always easier for me to just give an example than to try to, Can you see this dream, the blue egg?
We don't see anything yet.
Oh, hold on. Don't see anything yet. That's a common experience with me. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a woman named Alice. The backdrop simply was that she was at a retreat somewhere, and she's usually quite anxious, but she was having a good time, and she had this dream. So the predicate of the dream in the beginning was, I was in Mexico. I was sitting across from Anna, my roommate on the trip, and there were square wooden stools with cane tops. That's interesting, actually, the level of detail. That shows that her senses, her eyes are open, that she's actually taking in the events of the dream. It's an event in the dream that there are these stools with cane tops, you might say. Now comes a real event, an encounter. A big, beautiful chicken came, black and white feathers, got under the stool and laid a giant blue egg. It was as big as an ostrich egg. It was just gorgeous. And when I spoke to her in the session, we dwelled on that moment and her feelings. It was just a sense of excitement, of wonder, almost like childlike delight. And the fact that the chicken had come under her stool and laid this, all of this was wonderful, wonderful, gorgeous. So we see her in the beginning of the dream in feeling. She's in feeling. Okay, now we're going to move to the territory you were just talking about, Jeff. Reaction. Okay. It was just gorgeous, and I didn't know what to do with it. Well, what's the eye that doesn't know what to do with gorgeous? What part of us doesn't know what to do with gorgeous? Well, it's the I, it's the waking life, self, it's the practical, it's the, you'll see, right? So we go into reaction that's full of story. I wanted someone to take a picture. So I want to capture it, I want to own it, right? But nobody could, and I wanted to save it, but how do you save an egg? I thought maybe they could hard boil it. I thought maybe I should eat it, but of course I'm a vegan, so I did nothing. So I didn't think I should do that, but I wondered if there was some incredible nourishment for me if I did eat it. The chicken seemed outraged that we would take her eggs, which she had abandoned. Some schmutzy things got on the shell. I didn't know if I should clean it or take it to the kitchen. I thought maybe they should hard boil it so that maybe I could take it home and protect it. I think there was something about wanting my ex to have the same experience. So everything you're seeing here is reactivity, anxiety, thinking, planning, plotting, blah, 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 blah. Where unfortunately, a lot of us spend most of our days problem solving, right? And she lost the feeling. So if you're dreaming of, I can't find my car in the parking lot, or I can't find my wallet, or what was the one you gave me? The Jeff.
The exam when you're not wearing pants and you're just running.
Oh, oh wow! What, you're running away from the exam? This wasn't your dream, was it?
The original. I thought this was fairly common, right? But
oh yeah, I'm sure everybody's had that.
I thought it was again bad pizza, but
okay. So what we can do is, especially if these dreams are repeated, is we can help move the person from the reactivity to a feeling, because the theory of it is that underneath every reaction is a deeper feeling that's covered over by the reaction. So like in that moment when you're naked, right? For many people, there's a feeling, there's a reaction of shame about being naked. But what is that really about? I mean, if we get underneath the shame, and it takes work, and try to kind of work with the person and re-experience it, maybe it's not so bad to be naked. Maybe it's actually okay to be naked. And eventually people will have a dream where they're naked and it's no big deal. Everybody else is wearing clothes, they're naked, they're walking around, just like you and I did when we were 2 and 3. Right? So to get to that state where like you're no longer ashamed or embarrassed, or what a beautiful place to get back to, right? And the dream can allow that once we get past the reactivity. So it is useful to have dreams where you're reactive. And in fact, most of my clients in the beginning, their dreams are almost 100% reactivity, because that's where they're coming from. But over time, you can get to a dream where you're actually deeper in feeling. Does that answer your question?
Oh, it's fantastic. Thank you. And I'll hold off on the second one unless we have more time at the end.
Well, we have a couple more questions, but I'm interested in the egg.
Okay.
This big blue egg, and
yeah.
she wanted her ex to have the same experience, which
right.
is
sounds generous, huh?
Well, maybe, or vindictive, depending on how she was feeling about this egg. She was very proud that the chicken laid the egg under her stool, and
right.
Beautiful, but that's responsibility. Now she had a responsibility.
Right. She turned her joy into responsibility. That's a good way of thinking of it. There's a little more detail we could go into, but I'm not sure how much time we have. But basically, notice that the chicken seemed outraged Okay, so my question is, well, how do you know this? Like, what is it about a chicken that tells you it's outraged? She said, "Oh no, she's outraged. I knew it." And I said, "Well, maybe she's outraged because you just can't appreciate her egg. You have to go into all this, machination." And that's confirmed by this schmutz is Yiddish for like dirt. There's like dirt on the shell suddenly. What is the dirt on the shell? Well, when we get lost in our anxieties as she is, she's no longer experiencing the egg and its beauty, right? It's covered over. So we don't really work with symbols particularly, but what I would say is that a dream is interactive. All the elements in the dream are, in a way, they're alive and they're responding either to things you're thinking or doing. It's a weird thing to think about, but imagine a world where everything's alive and everything's responsive to what you happen to be, your opinions. So if you start worrying about your egg, the egg responds by covering itself with dirt. I mean, that's how I view the dream, as a dynamic, living, interactive experience. Should we go to the questions? Or?
Yeah, Nathaniel Doppelberg had a question, and
Okay, I'm gonna turn off this
okay,
if I can.
Nathaniel, do you want to, if you're still there, do you want to share that question?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Good to see you.
I would turn on my video too, but we're a little dark right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just asking. I know that you talked about the Tibetans, and I know that Tibetans have a rich tradition of dream and sleep yogas, and
Yes.
that's actually one of the big reasons that I was like, I have to come to your talk tonight, because I saw what you were talking about, and I've tried to practice dream and sleep yogas, and I do meditate regularly in my waking life, but I've had like very little sort of success actually engaging with it. And so I was curious if you've practiced that kind of thing, or if you've guided your clients to practice it as ways to deepen the kinds of conversations that you're having with folks. And also, just more generally, I'm curious if if you have thoughts in general about what those practices involve. I'm all ears.
Okay. Thanks, Nate. So I was I interviewed a man named Tarab Tolku, who lived in Elsinore, Hamlet's castle town in Denmark. He'd been invited, he was the Dalai Lama's generation, and been invited by the Prince of Denmark to run their Tibetan collection. That's cool. And he taught this dream yoga practice. So I got to talk with him about it. As a boy, he actually would dream for people. Like Tibetan peasants would come to his teacher and the boy would dream for them, and then the teacher would work with those dreams. Tibetan dream yoga is a practice that comes out of, it's for people who already have a stable meditation practice. And the Tibetans are wonderfully pragmatic, and they say things like, well, this way you can meditate for an extra 6 hours a day, right? You can meditate when you're awake, and then while you're sleeping, you can meditate another 6 hours. So if you're capable, I'm never, people say, oh, they're mystical. But actually, Tibetans aren't that way. They're actually very pragmatic in a certain way. But so the practice, in my opinion, which later got adulterated and adopted in the West as lucid dreaming, because the Tibetan method was in part to start meditating in the dream and achieve that higher consciousness to make things happen in the dream. My point is that I don't want to do that. I view the dream as a natural resource. And I'm very concerned that unless I'm enlightened, which I'm not, I will mess up the dream by trying to control it. I mean, I don't want to control waterfalls. I don't want to control my plants growing too much. I don't want to control butterflies, and I don't want to control dreams. I want them to be the natural experiences they're meant to be. And I want to encounter the feelings in them without my ego coming in and saying, that guy coming at me with a knife, well, I'll pull out a gun and shoot him, which is sort of the lucid dreaming deal, right?
Right.
I'm not going to do that. Maybe the guy's running at me with a knife because I dropped the knife. Maybe he's running at me with a knife because I need to experience terror. I don't know. I don't want to think I'm smarter than the dream.
Right. Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yes, of course.
Um, so yeah, I feel very aligned with what you just described in terms of the dreams as a natural resource. I guess something that I know but I don't experience in my own practice is like this idea that the Tibetans talk about, that in dreams where we're experiencing intense emotions, the afflictions that you were talking about, it's
Yes.
kind of like we're wandering in a delusional state, like
Mhm.
wandering in samsara, wandering in a state of suffering.
Yes.
And so I wonder about that aspect of things. I've also heard some therapists talk about how they sometimes question whether it's helpful to have a client talk on and on and on about a difficult experience that they're having, because sometimes the understanding is that the client is getting stuck in that sort of cycle or circle of storytelling, or maybe not even storytelling, honestly, just like an emotional cycle that they're kind of stuck in.
Right.
So I wonder what your take is on that aspect of dreams, kind of
Right.
in what ways they're sort of repeating a cycle and not necessarily helping us heal and move to a new state of being.
So just quickly, the I want to put out, you know, that some people have trauma, profound trauma, and when that trauma layer happens and comes up in dream work, I often refer them to people who are experts in trauma. So in those cases, it may not be useful to go over the same dream over and over again. But if the dreams are moving, that's different. By moving, I mean moving from reactivity to feeling. And in the beginning, it's painful, as you mentioned, to see your delusions fall apart, to see that your idea of yourself and your opinion of yourself is not backed up by the dream. The dream is showing you that you might think you're an honest person, but in the dream you lied. And I always say, well, why do you lie like that in waking life? And usually after a while, it turns out, yeah, the guy does lie like that in waking life. Are you having an affair? Because in the dream you're having an affair. Oh yeah, I'm having an affair. Okay. So dreams are incredibly honest, and that's great, but it's not always easy for people to face their lies and delusions. And it's certainly not easy to break the habit of story making, because as I view the ego or the I as a story making mechanism that wants to run, keep running, as you said, on and on and on. Fortunately, in this work, I don't do that. I'm not doing the kind of psychotherapy, often popularized on TV, where you're talking things over. I go to the dreams. If the dreams bring it up, we talk about it. If they don't bring it up, we don't talk about it, because I want to work with the dream and what the dream brought. I personally feel our imagination, the dream imagination, is much more profound in making providing a point of view about our waking life than our usual thoughts and opinions.
Right.
In fact, I'd be more radical and say that instead of the usual thing, which is to interpret dreams from the point of view of waking life, I would like to interpret waking life from the point of view of the dream.
That's
by which I mean this place of feeling and depth that we can get to. We don't get there right away. It takes time, and it takes really a lot of love between me and the person to support that person, first to face the delusional reactivities, and then secondly to come to feeling. And by the way, feeling isn't all fun either. When you feel great joy in a dream, you also often feel great pain, right? It's, terror is not fun to feel. Pain is not fun to feel. And yet our dreams want to bring us to these profound, deep feelings that we have so we can become more whole.
Right.
We have three questions, two hands up, one chat question, and 4 minutes. So I think we might run a little bit over if that's okay. I don't think
Okay with me.
I'll run out and put a few more quarters in our meter so that we can run over if we have to. But Moshe Usadi had a question about dreams that
Okay.
Moshe, are you there? And would you like to?
Yeah, I'm on my husband's account.
Okay.
So, my name's Adrian.
Hi, Adrian.
Hi, how are you? My question is, what do you do when, and I'm just assuming you've encountered this, where a patient has a dream and then it comes to fruition in reality? Do you put weight into that? Do you say, well, it's the subconscious putting pieces together, and then the person, has intuits it into what may be seen as a foregone conclusion?
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of those, and what do you do with them?
I'm going to try to answer your question, Adrian. I always feel when I hear that question that there's some story behind it. I'd love to know, but I'm not going to out you right now. But let's just say that yes, I think I know a dream for some people can have premonition, and there may be many explanations for that. I don't do the metaphysics. In other words, I say, wow, okay, that seems to have happened. Let's talk about that. How do you feel about it? But I feel like it's up to each person to decide for themselves what reality map they want to make that takes that into account. I'll give us a slightly different example. It might give you an idea of my approach. For instance, when we do dream of the dead, they come into our dreams. I'll even say, this person has made a tremendous effort to come into your dream, right? And the reason I say it that way is I want people to really experience what they're already experiencing, but more deeply, that this is intentional, that this was meant for them, and so they can actually have the experience for themselves. But like I say, I work with clients from, skeptical libertarian scientists to deeply religious Buddhists, Jews, and Christians, and everywhere along the way. And yet we all work together very well because we go back to the feelings in the dream. And, even in the case you mentioned, I still would go back to the feelings in the actual dream, even if the dream also had a prophetic character. I still would be interested in knowing, what did you feel? Who did you encounter? What happened? Those are still going to be my questions.
Okay, and that's where I guess I was kind of going with this, and yes, as you said, there's definitely a story behind this, but
maybe you'll share it with me offline or something.
Absolutely. Just, I don't want to, I know there are other people that have questions, if there were more time, I wouldn't mind sharing it here, but that was kind of my question, is where do you find those feelings? And would love to share that dream with you, only because I guess I don't see in this specific instance where there were feelings, if that makes sense. So
right.
If you're saying you still can find those feelings in there regardless.
Well, I'm looking for the feelings, but I do note that in some cases, instead of a feeling, there's a reaction, which I view as a displacement of feeling, or there's no feeling. I mean, that's also quite profound in a dream. That let me, a simple example, someone says, well, I dreamed a tiger came into the room, but I didn't have any time for it because I had to take a test.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my question would be, well, you're seeing a tiger. How far away are you? Oh, 2 feet. I said, well, don't you feel anything there? I mean, I would feel terrified.
Right.
Wouldn't you? So sometimes what we note in a dream, quite often, I mean, many of us have become very numb. So dreams will show us that. Oh, I don't have the ability to feel. I've lost the knack of feeling. And maybe the dream is trying to bring me back to that. But I refused it. I got to take my test. You know, I had a client who dreamed she's driving down the street in New Orleans and there was a 9-foot giant, naked and beautiful, she said, lying on the curb. I said, did you stop? I mean, this is a rather unusual thing. She said, well, I had to get to work. You know, and that's really telling us, yeah, this is how you're living your life in waking life, right? You're driving by the miracles. So the absence of feeling is also very significant.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Let's, if we don't mind taking a few more minutes, Alexander, you've had a virtual hand up for a while. Do you want?
And that hurts.
Your virtual arm must be exhausted by now. So,
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. So you touched on this in the notion of how the dreams can begin to break down our delusions.
Mhm.
And what fascinates me about dreams, I often have this uncanny sense that the dream knows more about me than often I am comfortable with it knowing. It sees things about my life, my being, and it sometimes I have a feeling of shame at being seen in that way. Other times I have a deep appreciation for the care of this intelligence the intelligence of the imagination that can see me with this clarity and tell it like it is to me,
Right.
like a counselor or it's almost like a strange kind of ancient mentor or alien watching.
Right.
And I'm curious just to hear a little bit more about, this imaginative intelligence that sees us so clearly, clearer than we can often see ourselves in certain ways.
Right. So I mean, what you're saying is music to my ears and is wonderful. And I think it's true that the dream can have a better imagination of our lives than our waking life consciousness offers. We could say it this way that, there's the persona that we have, which is the role in life, which is a very narrow aperture. I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a father, a brother, whatever. We have the ego, which is also a fairly narrow aperture. And then there's this light, essentially, that the dream is offering, which is huge and of great depth. And it even has the capacity to, the dead and the living meet there, the past and the future meet there. I mean, the dream space itself is of great imagination, of primary imagination. And we haven't talked at all about what I call the angelic or the archetypal or the encounters with some beings in dreams who, presences who seem to have a quality of being teachers, tricksters, and so forth, who can come to us and really move us so deeply. And sometimes I think of them as, in a sense, the personification of the entire dream itself. That is, they almost as if the dream can speak, the dream as a whole can speak through these people. But we don't get to those kinds of encounters usually until we've done a lot of work of purifying these afflictive states of mind. Because, if one of these teachers comes up to you and you're still reactive, you might run away, or you might diss them, or you might say, oh, well, could I have your business card? I'll get in touch with you later. Or, there's all kinds of ways we might, avoid the encounter. So we have dreams of what I would call missed encounters. But the the possibility of experiences of wonder and awe, which again I view as on the line, you know, they're like undertones or overtones of fear and terror, right? So wonder, awe, reverence, fear, terror, they're really the same chord, right, of feeling. But the possibility that dreams can give us such feelings of reverence and awe. And that's not only that, but if we could live our lives from the point of view that that gives us and begin to experience that in waking life experiences and encounters, then dreams truly have transformed our consciousness and improved our lives.
Zarko, you have a question. You've had your hand up for a while. Let's
Oh,
take the last one, and then I want to wrap this up.
okay. My question is kind of practical question. I don't dream at all, or if I dream prosaic things with no highlights to it, from which I can kind of start the point or remember it or write it down or whatever. I will dream, you know, the shopping for eggs on supermarket, and there is nothing remarkable about it. And so I have to read your book to get into that mood and find something in my dreams. However, I don't have any problem to get into what I would call voyages. I read about it, about shamanic voyages or something like that. Basically, I can listen to the music or to drums, put it on, and I go through the door if I want, or through the tree or whatever it. My special, I prefer to go through the, you know, the Porta del Paradiso in Florence, getting through, the doors open, and I'm in New World, and the things which happen there are most of the time surprising to me because I don't expect them. Some strange things happening. Grandfather, whom I never met, never talked, never, you know, it's there in the shape of the bird, and he's telling me, find my grave and make mass on that grave. Oh, I see Bororo Indians dancing like a skeleton there. Now, my question is this one. Do I have, you know, to take those voyages seriously as dreams of some kind of healing process or something, what they talk to me, or should I still insist on reading your book and interpret my dream instead of these voyages? Thank you.
Well, naturally, you should read my book, but but I mean, it's some people, I gather you're one of them, just have this wonderful capacity to do what we might call the waking dream. And I actually studied with a teacher, I describe it in the book, in Jerusalem. Her name is Colette, and she had studied with a French master of the, what they call it, Rêve éveillé, dirigé, the waking, directed waking dream. So Jung, in his Memory, Dreams, and Reflections, apparently writes about, and also in the Red Book, talks about his ability to do this. So to me, you have a great gift. I of course, I would take it seriously, especially as you noted, if you're being surprised. That seems to me the key, where it's not you're not controlling the experience, but you're being surprised. That's very important. When I heard that, I thought, yes, this is, it's not a self-serving fantasy, but actually it's an experience. So it could be just you don't, this is how you access what I would call primary imagination, or what Coleridge calls primary imagination. Seems like a wonderful thing, but I hope you're taking note and writing down and remembering, and then it could be worked with if yes, I think that could be worked with. It's unusual. I don't know many people who can do that, but God bless you. If you're one of them, that's great. I mean, that sounds terrific to me. Maybe, you know, that activity is affecting your dream life. I don't know. I don't think it's a concern.
Thank you.
Yeah, it seems beautiful
I
to me.
think that's a great place for us to end up. I like the contrast between Zarko's dream about going to the supermarket and shopping for eggs, nothing remarkable, which is
Right.
pretty much describes what most of my dreams are like. But then this fantastic dream
Right.
surprised him in all sorts of ways. That
Right.
sort of covers the waterfront. But
Yeah, I mean,
Rodger,
yeah, I just want to say that these so-called banal dreams actually do have profound feelings, but it takes a little work to get to them. They have feelings of sadness. They have feelings of, they have intensities underneath them, but the problem is we dismiss them because of their superficial resemblance to waking life without probing a little bit what's actually going on within the dream. I contend that. I could be wrong, but very often that's the case. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to say that. I don't want to leave it on the table that some people have great dreams and some people, no, I don't buy that. Everyone's having really the dreams they need to be having, but if you attend to them in a certain way and cultivate and develop, you have to invest, right? You have to invest into the experience to get something out of it.
I'm still struck by the dream of the woman who's driving to work and sees this beautiful, unusual giant lying by the side of the road, but I have to get to work.
Right. Well, so
sort of the meaning of these boring dreams for me.
Yeah, but what we
I gotta get
do,
all this filing done, so.
what we do with that is to say, let's stop the car and let's look at the giant out the window. Can you see him? Yes. What is it like? That's nice. Can you get out of the car? Okay, get out of the car. Can you take a couple steps closer? What are you feeling? Fear. Oh, okay. Now we know. She's driven because she has fear. So we move it. We don't have to, we're not stuck with it. Okay. That's part of the work.
Remember a more interesting or provocative conversation. I suspect that all the people, we could several dozen people participating in this feel the same way. So Rodger, just thank you so
Right.
much. I for one am going to be proposing one of your books to my book club because I think it's something we.
Okay. Can I put my email here if anyone wants to get in touch about doing this work?
Yes,
I'd be
put that
happy.
in the chat.
All right, just put it in. It's just Dream Tiger Gmail, but or just get in touch with me if you want to say hi. I just feel wonderful that I had a chance to. I don't always get a chance to be with my fellow Yaleys, so it's kind of cool. It seems like a really nice group. So thank you all for putting up with me.
And thanks to all of you from Tokyo and everywhere else that you're coming in from. So we're going to take a break from Must See Yale for the holidays, but we'll be back January 6th, I think.
Yeah, and everybody come back and join. And Rodger, you're welcome to come with us every Thursday night. You know what you said about the Yale community. That's what this is about. And we're all enjoying it. So thank you.
I can't wait to go to bed and see if I'm going to have some dreams.
Yeah, you will.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Good night.